Hello, everyone, and welcome to our penultimate Zeitgeist video for British Lit. We call this period Restoration and Revolution, at least I call it that. What does that mean? Well, we're talking about the restoration of the monarchy and the Glorious Revolution. We will talk about whether or not it was actually glorious in just a moment, but let's kick things off by actually thinking about the restoration of the monarchy. This lovely dude up here in the wig is Charles II. You can tell he's just seems like a lovely human, doesn't he? And he certainly has exciting choices in fashion and wigs. So Charles II comes to the throne in 1660 after the whole Civil War, after the whole protectorate period, and he promises to govern in conjunction with Parliament and to have an England that's got a little bit more religious tolerance than what we were used to in the decades that preceded. Monarch's promises, take them with a grain of salt. He did want to work more with Parliament, and he was interested certainly in a little bit more religious tolerance. If nothing else, it would make his life easier. But his Parliament was made up entirely of Cavaliers. They were not interested in extending any courtesies whatsoever to the Puritans in the country. And so Parliament really did work against his goal in that area. So religious division is obviously still a problem in England. And this is even more of a problem because Charles, who is Anglican, doesn't have any legitimate children. We've already seen how that can be a source of stress. And his brother, who's his heir, James, is openly Catholic. So Parliament is divided about whether or not they should exclude James from the order of succession or whether they should let him come to power. And Charles ends up getting sick of them all and dissolving Parliament, heard this before, and James eventually does come to the throne after his death. But he only rules for 3 years because he begins to really promote his Catholic supporters, and Parliament takes action against him. And basically they drive him out, drive him to the continent. And Parliament offers James's daughter, Mary, who's a Protestant, here she is right here, surrounded by angels, and with her husband, William. They are both Protestant. And so Parliament offers them the throne as joint rulers of England. Because James has fled to the continent, the throne is just empty. And so Parliament says, oh, look, we can install these people in the throne and there doesn't have to be any fighting and everything can just be hunky-dory and it's no big deal. This isn't a coup, not whatsoever. And so they call it the Glorious Revolution because it is theoretically, at least, somewhat bloodless, without a whole lot of fighting. And so they are able to say Parliament now rules most of the time. William and Mary do have some powers, but they have much, much less control than monarchs have ever had before. And this forms the foundation for the way that we think of the British monarchy from here on out. Okay. So aside from the drama with the monarchy, let's talk about what's going on in the world of learning. Up till this point, if you were an educated person, it was at least theoretically possible for you to keep up with new developments in all fields of knowledge and learning, if you wanted to do so. But in the late 17th century, we see the beginnings of the way we think of academia now, with specialization and people really devoting themselves to specific fields of learning. We have at this time the founding of the Royal Society of London. That happens in 1662. They encourage and spread knowledge of scientific discoveries, and they encourage science to be based on observation, experimentation, and experience. And so this is really the beginnings of scientific disciplines in the way that we think about them now. Microscopes and telescopes are invented during this time period. Isaac Newton, I'm sure we've all heard of him, introduces physics and the laws of gravity and celestial mechanics and optics. We have William Harvey, who is the first person to really talk to us about the circulation of blood through the body. Robert Boyle, who is the father of chemistry and teaches us that the pressure and volume of gas are inversely proportionate. We have Francis Bacon, who champions observation and measurement and inductive reasoning. We have all these great developments going on, and there's just so much happening that this leads to this greater kind of specialization. Aside from scientific and empirical developments, there's lots of intellectual and cultural developments happening in other fields as well. We have this map down here in the lower left that is a celestial map that comes from John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress, which is an incredibly famous and influential book. Some people have called it the first novel written in the English language. I'm not sure it quite qualifies as a novel, but it's certainly a very influential long format text. It's a Christian allegory describing the journey of Pilgrim through his life and into the celestial celestial city. And pretty much any kind of long format text that we get from here on out is influenced by this in some way, and lots of people are reading it, and it shows that we have this desire for narrative that's out there as well. Another important thing, we're going to scroll to this lovely frontispiece from Leviathan, which is a book that's written by Thomas Hobbes. If I zoom in here, you can see he contains multitudes, quite literally. He's full of different people. This is a metaphor. And Thomas Hobbes is I keep saying the first, I don't know if I feel comfortable saying all that, but Thomas Hobbes gives us a very definitive understanding of rule and sovereignty in a secular context. He's very keen to separate, not celebrate, separate God, morality, and religion from earthly power. And so he gives us a long treatise on that, which is Leviathan. John Locke also at this time is arguing that all men are naturally free. We also at this point have the revival of the theater. So let's scroll down to this big image here. Theater, as popular as it had been in the rules of Elizabeth I and James I, the theaters were all closed and shuttered. It was illegal to perform plays during the Protectorate. And so we have theater coming back in this time period with a vengeance. We have, once Charles II comes to the throne, we have a really different kind of theater, though. You can see just even from this picture that it's smaller, that the people who are there are more elite, right? This is not the intermingling of classes and different parts of society that we have in the Elizabethan theater. This is a theater that's focused on spectacular sets and costumes and witty dialogue and singing and dancing and lots of innuendo. And so it's pricier and it's way more exclusive, and it's not so much about teaching any kind of lessons as much as it is making rich people laugh. Right. And so this is also the time when we see a huge surge of women acting on the stage. I will not say it's going to represent the first time that women have acted on the stage in England. I am not certain of that. And I'm certainly not willing to say it in any definitive format, but it is certainly a major feature of Restoration era theater. To go along with this change in theater, we also see a change in the way that the classes of society sort of think about themselves. The upper class tends to be really like morally lax and loosey-goosey and corrupt and not really like worried about whether or not they're living a good life. And when you think about middle classes and the working classes, we have a much more conservative set of values and people who are focused on living a good, moral, and correct life. So unfortunately, this is also a period with a couple of really major tragedies. In the mid-1660s, England's climate is really rough. I mean, they have a lot of droughts and they have a lot of hot summers and strong winds. And we have two really big catastrophes that happen in London as a result. In 1665, we have the Great Plague. We have about 100,000 people who are killed within a 2-year time span and who've died of the plague. And then in 1666, we have, as you can see in this image, the Great Fire of London. London is so overcrowded. Everybody's living in these like timber framed houses that are all like stacked up on top of each other and don't even like, separate in the street. They'd often like arc over the street where people walk underneath. And so we have like really ripe conditions for fire, especially with the dry weather and the hot summers and all of those kinds of things. So the Great Fire of 1666 burned for about 5 days without stopping. It destroyed more than 370 acres of the city. About 13,000 homes were destroyed and left about 100,000 people homeless. That's about 1/6 of the city's population. So if you think about, we've lost 100,000 people to the plague, and we have about 100,000 people who are experiencing homelessness due to the Great Fire. It's kind of a grim place to be, London, at this time. And so, there's certainly a lot of reform that needs to happen in terms of the way that London works. And even though it is still a place of economic opportunity, it is also a place of great hazard and danger as well. Last development we really need to talk about, though, is the fact that we do have the founding of Great Britain in this time period. In 1707, the Act of Union officially creates Great Britain, which is England, Scotland, and Wales. It is not quite the complete union that we have now. It's not the full United Kingdom. That's to come still. But we do now have that officially recognized at this time period for here. So that's what we've got in the Restoration and Revolution time period. We've got one more Zeitgeist video coming up, and that will get us through into the 18th century. and about the time that we start to see a separation between what we think of as England and America. But that's yet to come. So thank you very much and enjoy, and I will see you next time.